back with another episode of Council Bluffs Today. Hi, I am Todd Studer, and the wonderful lady to my left, on your right side of the screen, this is Brandy Waller, and she is the CEO at New Vision Homeless Services. Thank you so much for coming over. Good to see you again. It's been a little while since you've been here.
It has. Thank you for inviting me, and you've been busy.
Oh, yeah, we're always busy.
Yeah, it's been amazing to hear all the stories of Council Bluffs. You know, I was born and raised in this city, and there's just so much amazing things going on.
And that was the entire concept when got this going back in October of 2024, that I knew that so much was flying under the radar. And even the stuff that wasn't, such as what you do, most people know who you are, but how many of the stories and the successes and the challenges and everything else does everybody know? Because most of that is just it's just your day.
Yes.
But most people don't know.
They have no clue. You know, I teach de-escalation classes, and there's so much information coming into our brains every day that the way that we have survived is that the bad or harmful information always goes to the front. Always to the front of mind. Be like, oh, that's bad, I can't go there. Or, oh, this happened at a store, I can't go there. And the reality is those are such small micro pieces of what happens in a day. There's so much more good that we just don't catalog to the front of the brain. And so I fight that a lot, because you see individuals that might be on sheltered, on house, dealing with mental health or substance abuse, and we put all of them in a category. And that is just not true. You know, I get to see the good every day. I get to see people do get better. You know, I get to see the success stories. I see people all the time in the community that once came through our shelter, and I'm like, whoa, housing looks good on you, you know?
Right.
And so that's what keeps me going, and the team. And it's been pretty awesome this last year, because we really made a conscious effort to put the human back into homelessness, that this is somebody's son or daughter, and that they do get better, instead of focusing on that small percentage of people that need a higher level of care. And unfortunately, it's not available in our community right now. Let's look at all of the good that the community does, not New Visions or Brandy. Every time I hand out a hot meal, every time I hand out a warm pair of socks or hand out a blanket, it's because the community has come together, because we are good and they want to see people succeed. So
I just thought of an analogy with what it is that you're talking about. This is going to sound a little random, and I apologize, but I will get to a point. That back when it's around 2010, I forget when it was, that the Saints won the Super Bowl. 4 years later, after that, Saints are still the Saints.
Yes.
You look at the team, and it's still the Saints. Drew Brees is still the quarterback. But Drew Brees was one of 4 players that were still on the Saints that played in that game from 4 years previous. We look at the homeless situation and the folks that have found themselves in that situation almost like a team that never changes, but they change all the time.
Oh, all the time.
There's different people that you are helping, and unfortunately, I mean, I don't know of what a solution is to make homelessness just go away completely.
Yeah.
So we understand that, okay, this is a phenomenon that has to be dealt with, it has to be helped, but it's always moving and it's always evolving.
Oh, yeah. And the reality is, I mean, last year between our street outreach team and our shelter, we had contact our SLEP people in our shelter, about 1,500 people. And that's just who my agency who had contact in Council Bluffs. There's not even close to 1,500 people. Last night, I think I slept like 97 individuals. And then on the streets, there's about 100 individuals unsheltered, you know, not even close to that. Where did the other individuals go? They got housed. They resolved their homelessness. You know, they got back with relationships, or were able to go back and live with a family member, or we got them tools to get better, or we relocated them to somewhere where they had a positive housing solution. And so we get to do that work. And I get to see, I would not be here 23 years if everybody was still.
If it was the same people from 23 years ago.
Dog, I'd be a great Walmart greeter. I love people, like to talk to them, but people do get better. And sometimes they just need that small touch. They just need a month to save a couple paychecks so that they could go back out there. They just need a soft subsidy of a couple $100. You know, they saved all this money and they need it. They need to and sometimes it's the bottom, they're like, hot dog, I am laying on a mat this close to another man. I don't have lockers to put my stuff in. Maybe my mom's rules weren't that crazy, or maybe I should start rethinking my life choices, and maybe I need help for addiction. Maybe I need help getting my mental health, So again, we're a catalyst of change. I'm not inviting people from all over the nation to come to my shelter. My shelter is the only one that still sleeps overflow every single night. My building was meant for 48 men in the shelter, 1 meal a day. And at the time, it was 26 units of transitional living. That was all we were built for. Some days I see 200 to 300 people through my campus right now, and it's not because I'm like, hey, come to us. And there's so many rumors out there that I get paid per person per night or paid this. I do not. I do it, and I've raised my hand. And that's the funny part, because if you watch social media, sometimes there's like two sides to it. It's like they should just get a job and get better. And then other people's like, well, we have to help them. And the one side's like, well, why don't you invite them into your house if you want to help them? And then the other person's like, well, I'm trying to help, but they can't come to my house. I'm like, I have invited them into my house. I have invited them. And I said, I want you to come for you could have at least access to help, because you can't, when you don't have a place to lay your pillow, think about life choices. You're living out of fight, flight, or freeze. You're living out of, how do I survive today? How do I not freeze to death today? I've never had to ask myself that in my whole entire life. How do me and my family not freeze to death? And the people I serve think that way. So they need a place where they could come and take a breath. And the cool part is, because of our amazing community, I get to be that beacon of hope. Me and my team and so many other nonprofits. Like I said, on average, it takes about 10 touches whether it's other nonprofits, it's other facilities, Iowa Workforce Development, 10 touches to exit homelessness. So I'm not doing this by myself. There's a whole community of people, but I get to see the good. And it's pretty awesome when I get to see that.
That is, the fact that it is 10,
Yep.
to me, kind of explains where some of those feelings of hopelessness can come from. Because if there is that many touches, as you put it, in order to find a path out, how's the average person supposed to know that path?
It is. So I'm on the board of Leadership Council Bluffs, and then I'm also in Leadership Omaha this year. But part of Leadership Council Bluffs is we do a poverty simulation. And then in Leadership Omaha, we just did a reentry simulation with RISE for people coming out of justice involvement. So coming out of prisons, which the majority of people, over 90% of people that do go, will come back into our community. And we want them to be successful. But what's crazy about it is right before, especially in the Leadership Council Bluffs days, I give this real inspirational speech, and then we go to the poverty simulation. And so these are leaders of our community, and they're asked to do like a 4-week simulation. So each week is about 20 minutes. And in that week, you have to get your IDs, you have to set up housing, you have to, go to daycare, and you get a bus ticket and a certain amount of money. And so you have all of these things you have to acquire in 1 week. But when you don't have an ID, you have to go to the Social Security, but you don't have transportation. So it's all these things. And so it is. And then I'm on a table. I won't call it, but it's one that a lot of my clients have to go to. And I'm just not a nice person. And I use stories of how I've seen the people I serve get treated. Actual stories of how they are treated, and it's very poorly. And they don't even look at them as a person. They look at me and I'm like, they could speak for themselves. And so the biases that come with that, and I use those, and people are like, what happened to nice Brandy? And then as the weeks go on in this simulation, people give up. Just in the reentry thing that I just did a couple of weeks ago, people were opting to go to jail because they're like, we can't complete this. There's no way. When you don't have any money and you have to start paying restitution, but you have to have an address and you have no address. And for me to get an ID, you have to have mail that's 30 days old. So I have to send you a piece of mail to New Vision. So in that meantime, you're just sitting there waiting. And you see all of these bright people that this is just a simulation, put up their hands and give up. And I'm like, now, and we always recap, and people will say, well, there's no winning in this. And I'm like, you are punished for being poor in our community. You're punished. Now to get housing, you're no longer Todd. You are a credit score, you are a social security number, you are eviction record, you are all of these things that corporation. You're no longer somebody that has made better choices, that has worked to get yourself out of that. And so if you need a car and you have bad credit because you lost a job, now you're paying 15, 16, 17, 22% interest on cars. And so it is amazing to me, and it's such a humbling experience doing a population simulation. And it's pretty cool to kind of see how people's like, I've never thought about it that way. You never thought, do I pay my car insurance or do I pay my lights? People aren't like, I just really want to break the law. There are really hard choices that are out there right now, but doing those kind of things, like you said, a lot of people don't think about that. And then afterwards, when I talk about it, I'm like, how many people wanted to come back to my table? And they're like, no, because I've been treated poorly by a medical provider before and I didn't want to go back to them, but there's 500 medical providers. But when there's one social security office, there's one probation office, there's one DOT, you don't want to go back to them. Right. And so sometimes it's easier just to throw your hands up. And that's where I am really trying to tackle right now with my agency is hopelessness breeds hopelessness. Hope breeds hope. How do I inject that hope back into people that we serve to not give up? Because I tell people all the time, is my shelter isn't your retirement plan. Your job when you're in my shelter is to get housed. And we're giving you all the tools, but that is your main focus. And how do I get them activated again to get into it? Because I can't control them. People think that just make them get a job. And I'm like, I can't make anybody do anything. I'm like, have you ever been married before? How's that working for you, making people do things? But how can I infuse hope? And so that's where we're at right now. We really want to infuse hope into the people that walk through our doors.
Service Master Restore by Schmader knows it can be hard to get things back to normal when you've suffered serious property damage due to flooding, fire, or smoke, and that can oftentimes lead to mold, and you may be left with all sorts of questions about how to get your home or business back to normal. It's easy. You give Cindy Schmader a call with Service Master Restore by Schmader. Her phone number, 402-339-9911. If you're looking for a laid-back spot with great food and even better company, it's the Mile Away on Old Lincoln Highway north of Council Bluffs. This family-run bar and grill is your go-to for mouth-watering wings, unbeatable weekly specials, and a welcoming atmosphere that feels like home. So, if you're catching a game, enjoying one of those specials, or just unwinding after a long day, the Mile Away has you covered. Open every day, Tuesday through Sunday at 8 for breakfast, and don't forget them at lunch and dinner time as well. It's the Mile Away, Old Lincoln Highway, north of Council Bluffs. Can you talk about any of those success stories? I mean, because as we said, they fly under the radar.
Yeah.
And we don't hear about that because everybody focuses on the negative stuff. But, without even getting into any names, are there some success stories that you can talk about?
So there's two stories, one that happened a while ago and one that's always at top of my mind why I do this work. Because it's hard. And there's been times I've got other job offers and I'm like, woo, very attractive. Yeah. One of them happened several years ago. I had this woman walk into our campus. And again, it's a low barrier men's shelter. And she had dirt and blood crusted to her face. She smelled like campfire. So I could deduct she's probably living in the woods. And I went to her and I said, hey, my name's Brandy. Can I help you? And she looked me up and down and she said, why the heck do you think you could help me? And I could have done two things. I could have thought, shoot, I got 200 other people I could go help. Or I looked at her like, it looks like she's having a really bad day. And so that's what I did. And I said, well, I'm not sure if I could help you, but I could give you a hygiene kit. You could go wash your face. And this was before I had women's showers in my facility because there was no places for women to go and shower, unless they were in a program. And so I gave her that and I said, I could get you some food. And so I'm like, would that help? And she's like, I guess. And so I went and got her that. And I said, well, I'll be in this office. She took it and she went and washed her face. And then 10 minutes later, she's standing outside of my door. And she said, you said your name was Brandy, right? I said, I sure did. And I said, do you want to have a seat? And she sat down and I said, what is going on? How'd you get here? And it was just like, she started talking and just boom, all of this came out. Like I was staying with my boyfriend and my boyfriend's friend at his mom's house and got kicked out because she said we weren't cleaning up, but they weren't cleaning up either. And she's like, now my boyfriend's taking it out on me and he's beating me and just like all this stuff. And I went, okay. I said, number one, it's never okay for anybody to lay their hands on you. I said, can I work with you to get you into like a domestic violence shelter or a women's shelter? And she said, she got really defensive. No, I can't go there. I can't go there. And trauma-informed care isn't what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you. There's a reason. I said, well, why can't you? And she looked at me and she said, I'm 17 years old. And my heart dropped because she looked a lot older than that. And I said, well, what about like a children's square or a boys' town? Let's get you somewhere safe. And she's like, nope, you can't make me go back. She's like, I've been in and out of foster care, group homes. My uncle has me, but he just wants my check. He don't care where I'm at. You can't make me go. And I can't. And here I am. I had to look at this child. She's still a child. She is still a child.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to ask her, I said, honey, when's the last time you felt safe? I have a 17-year-old son. I've never had to look at him and ask him, when's the last time he felt safe? And she had to think about it. And then she said, before my mom lost custody of me, I used to go to my great aunt's in Malvern. And she's like, I loved it out there, and we'd go and she would help us out. And then we'd come back to this area and stuff. I'm like, great. I said, do you know her number? How many of us at 10, 11 years old know our great aunt's number? Mm-hmm. And she's like, no. I'm like, do you know her last name? And she's like, no. And so I live in Neola right now, born and raised in Council Bluffs, live in Neola, but so I know how both sides work, but I know small towns. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, do you remember anything when you were in Malvern? She's like, we'd go to Casey's and we'd get donuts every single morning with our great aunt. And I said, well, let's call the Casey's. So I called the Casey's and it just so happened that the lady that answered the phone was the great aunt's neighbor. And she's like, I know her. I remember the kids and stuff like that. She's like, I'll give you her number. You've seen for the first time this little girl sit up in her chair. And
probably started to look a little younger,
yep,
too, didn't she?
Very much so.
Yep.
Very much the juvenileness of her, the innocentness of her. But life has taught her she had to be hard. Yeah. She had to put on the show. And just think about it. As a child walking into a low barrier homeless shelter in Millsite, because you have nowhere else to go, and somebody in the community told you, well, try New Visions, she is, remember, anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is because of fear, guilt, shame, anxiety. There's something going under anger. And what we do is we hit anger with anger, and then nobody's listening. Right. And then we get divided and stuff. But so I said, do you want to call your aunt or do you want me to? She says, can you please do it, Brandy? Her whole position and strong changed because she was afraid, had anxiety walking in. And then here's a stranger like, hey, I'm going to fix your life, Right. And so which I know isn't true for what I do. But anyways, and so I called and it rang and she started biting her nails. And then the aunt answered. I said, hey, I'm Brandy. I'm here with your niece. She's like, oh, I haven't seen her for years and years. And I said, well, she's kind of having a hard time. And I said, she needs a place where she could stay that's safe. And she's like, and she thought about you. Can she come? And the great aunt's like, oh my gosh, yes. Please, please, please. And she said, the only issue is I don't drive anymore. And I said, I will personally drive her there. And you seen this little girl with the smile come up. And she's like, thank you so much. And I said, well, I'm going to get some things gathered together and we'll be there probably in about an hour, or so. And the great aunt's like, I'm so excited. Just get her here. My neighbors will do all the shopping and stuff like that. And you see this tear on this little girl. And so I had to stop and get gas. So I had her in the car and I said, honey, do you want a snack? And she's like, Brandy, you've done so much. I'm like, listen, Malvern's a hot minute away. I'm going to get a snacky snack. You want one? And again, the juvenileness of her. She wanted puffy Cheetos and a Coke. And Todd, for the rest of my life, and when I get so much persecution and so much hate for what I do, I will always remember her face with the next question I asked her. I said, honey, you're 17. I said, how did you get here? She's eating her Cheeto, no emotion at all. She's like, when it got really bad, she said, I was 12. And on my 13th birthday, my mom said she was going to give me the best gift she could. And she shot me up with methamphetamine that day. And it took everything I had not to have a physical emotion because that was her reality. Yeah. That's all she's known. That's all she's known. She was never set up to succeed in life. Never set up. The system threw her out to an uncle that did not care about her, cared about her money. And I had to sit there and apologize to her for the way I said, I am so sorry that happened. You did not deserve that. And she's like, well, that's life, right? And I said, no, that's not life. And so I ended up, it was beautiful seeing the reuniting between the great aunt and her. And the good news is she actually went back and got her GED while she lived there. And then I haven't heard from her in a couple of years, but the last time I heard from her, she was in cosmetology school in Des Moines and met and got engaged. And so those are the stories, because guess what would have happened if there was no intervention for that girl? She would have turned 18. She would have been on the streets. She would have probably been making high choices to survive, you know. And again, we like to put judgment, but we're all wired to survive, you know. It's easy then to solicit yourself to survive for these women. And again, we don't see these people I serve as children that the system has failed them, that their parents have failed them. And that's where we have to stop, is because I could blame a lot of people in that situation. I could blame her mom. What the heck is that mom thinking? But I'm sure the mom has a lot of trauma of her own. You know, I could blame the systems. I could blame the schools. I could blame all of these things. But you got to get out of that drama triangle. At one point, we have to stop and say, this is a human being, and we need to listen to them. And we need to see exactly how we can help. And so that is another initiative that New Visions is. We're talking to a funder right now to go for a diversion program. So that's a prime example of diversion. You got to think about homelessness. For the last several years, it's like a funnel. And we're catching all of these people coming into homelessness, all of these people coming into homelessness, but they're trickling out. And so it's getting backed up, you know? And so we want to invert that funnel and only bring who has to come into homelessness. And that was a prime example. If I didn't say anything to her and just continued, she's just going to come into homelessness. She's going to continue. But I turned it upside down, but it takes people. So I'm hoping that we are able to expand our diversion, because New Visions is the easy button. You know, somebody in a camper in Walmart parking lot, go park outside New Visions. You know, a family, New Visions is open 24/7. Go to New Visions. A single woman, go to New Visions. You know, we're an easy button, and I need to have some more team members that could have a conversation to be like, might not be the easiest thing, but what's better for you? And what was best for this girl is to reunite her with her great aunt that she wasn't even thinking about, you know, because she didn't know the number and things like that. So that is something hopefully in the next year that we'll have a diversion program so that I could really focus on having those conversations. So that is my why story.
Well, and that's also, that's got to be complicated to put together because here's the thing is that this young lady found you just in roaming around and two people bumping into each other, and it was the right connection. That took a very hyper individual effort on your part to be able to make that happen. When you look at as an entity and as a whole, and how can we put programs in place, how do you maintain that individual help, and how you were able to figure this out as a program? Because programs are often have processes, and there is check marks, and there is, okay, this person goes here, this person goes here, and everything needs to be tracked. But that was not that kind of case. That was two right people meeting at the right time, and you recognized it. And that's the hard part about what you're doing.
And the hard part is right now is my team's drinking out of a fire hose. You know, I have 2 street outreach workers, 2. And last year we had contact with about 700 people that were living on the streets, you know, and so many people think, well, you have a street outreach team, you should be in the streets 24/7. Well, no, our goal is to get them off of the streets. And so we make initial contact with them, but then we have to do assessments on them. If they need a birth certificate ID, we have to do that on them. We have to help them get employment if they need that. If they need disability, we have to help them do that. And then let's say that they're at a place where we are able to get them employment or some sort of income. Well, now they need housed. And so now they have to have somebody take them to do the housing searches. Well, now they need to move in, but a lot of them don't have transportation. So my team's the one going and getting the the furniture from like a furniture project or moving vets forward. And I have 2 of them. So it's so easy to look at what we're not doing as opposed to all the work we're doing. And that's where I'm at too. And, because when I took over permanent leadership in 2023, I was a boots on the ground for a long time and I didn't see the complexity of systems.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go on a little bit of apology tour because I'm like, I'm coming to change systems and I'm going to rescue all of these people. And I'm just good. My heart was really good, but I didn't realize the complexity, like you said, of you have to do programs, you have to do outcomes, you have to do all this stuff to get funding. And then the more dollars you get, the more requirements you have to have. And then you have to have somebody on compliance that's making sure that all the grant reports. So it is such a complicated issue. And like you said, if I could have solved homelessness,
Yeah.
everybody would. That is one thing. I don't care what your thoughts on homelessness is. Everybody wants it solved. Every single person in the country, whether we solve it in a humane way or some people just think throw them in jail, we could all agree that parks should be meant for recreation and families and not having humans. But it's such a complicated issue that philanthropy cannot get us out of this. It can't. We have to change, go upstream and change legislation. We have to do some sort of rent stabilization, because we do have workers in our community that work 40 hours a week, but they can't work in high executive jobs. They are our dishwashers and our bussers, so we get our 1099 Applebee's, and they work just as many hours as we do. They just don't have the earning capabilities. They're going to need a subsidy to be able to survive so that they could go and work 40 hours a week. We take advantage of people that are low income workers all the time, and then we tell them, you suck, but don't raise prices on us because we like being comfortable. And that's where we're at, is the majority of our people have worked or do work or want to work. But even when they work 40 hours, it's still not enough. So they throw their hands up and say, why?
It's out of everything we've talked about so far, I think, and to be honest with you, I didn't think about this before, is that population that you are serving is fluid.
Yeah.
And it's not static. It's not the same people.
Nope, not at all.
It's different people coming in, moving out. I never thought of it that way before. Yep. And to me, that is an eye-opening concept that I'm not sure most people had even thought of it that way before.
No, because what people see are the same individuals kind of having kind of the same problems. Like if I have to have an intervention with a police officer where somebody comes on, I have expectations just like anywhere else. Again, I get a black eye because I call them in, and I get a black eye when I say, you're not being safe on my campus. Anxiety is really high when you're sleeping next to another man this close, or you walk in and you see all of these things and I tell you, I don't even have enough beds for you. Sometimes I don't even have enough mats. I have no locker. So sleep with everything you own on your chest. And so by the time I need an intervention, when the police do come, they already know the person's name. They already know them because they worked with them in the community. And Justin James talked a lot about this, like failing in systems, is that I'm not a mental health hospital. I'm not a substance abuse hospital. I'm not a nursing home. It's in my name. It's supposed to be emergency. I'm supposed to come give you something. I'm not the housing. And that's why I'm like, people are coming after me for solving the homeless situation. I'm like, housing is the only solution. I'm supposed to be the stabilizer. Mm-hmm. But when housing is blocked off and there's not options, and you've heard me say this on my last podcast, is homelessness is like an interstate. So many people are like, what's the one thing that causes homelessness? It's not one thing. You have a different story than I have. And that's one story of thousands and thousands and thousands of stories I've collected over 23 years. And how she got on the interstate of homelessness is completely different than an on-ramp somebody else. The problem we keep shutting off ramps. And we put everybody to this one thing, and then it backs it up. And again, that funnel, right. Like we have so many people coming in, but trickling out. And we want to stop people from coming in. Like if you could take a highway, let's go on the highway. But it might take a little bit work, like that diversion, to have that conversation, to not get you on there because it's going to be backed up. And what happens when you backed up on an interstate? Everybody's frustrated. Everybody is frustrated. The people trying to clear up the clog is frustrated. The people getting on are frustrated. The people that have been there for a long time. And so that's where, like we say, we have to work and think about it completely differently.
I can tell with you and that this has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with, because we're so divided where that is concerned, and it just seems that if you hear one thing that reminds you of one side, then you're just going to automatically fight against
Hmm.
it. It's got nothing to do with it with you. I mean,
It
I
does.
can look at you. You don't
I,
care
I,
who's
I
sitting
would
in.
say I am peoplecratic.
Yeah,
I don't buy into sides of
right.
politics. I don't, because I think there's great people on both sides. I think there's people making really bad decisions on both sides too.
Mm-hmm.
I want to invest into good people doing good things, you know, and I do a lot of advocacy. I was just in DC 2 weeks ago. I'm going back. I spend a lot of times up in Des Moines and Lincoln because I have my veterans campus. But I tell people all the time, I will be your biggest fan if that policy, that law will actually change homelessness. I don't care what side of the aisle it comes on. I will wear t-shirts and rah, rah, rah. This will help. But there's so much bad policy happening. So much bad policy. So recently in Iowa, there was the drug-free homeless campus. That was introduced, and it was by the Cicero Institution, which is a national corporation of development and stuff like that, because a lot of times developers want to go into downtown areas, but a lot of times you have a concentration of homelessness. Again, it's not a Council Bluffs issue, it's everywhere. So they go and propose all this legislation. So they did this drug-free homeless service campus. Our campus, you can't have drugs or alcohol on our campus. If we find it, you could either surrender it or pour it out, but you can't actively. Our garden is not a beer garden. You can't have it. But the reality is, and even right now, like, I have had minimal calls to have law enforcement come into my campus. It's people that are outside that I put my expectations on, and they're like, well, screw you, I'll just go outside and do it anyways. And then I want people in the community to be safe, and then we initiate that because they're not being compliant. And so this drug-free homeless service campus said that homeless service providers within 300 feet of their 300 feet are responsible for what happens in those 300 feet. And if there continues to be complaints about that, then I could lose my funding. And then as service providers, you could also have some criminal charges put towards you. And I'm like, there's a strip club within there. There's back trails within us and a railroad property that I have no authority over at all. And so what we're doing is now going after the helpers. And why, as a helper, should I continue doing this? And go even though New Visions is the easy route, for us providers, it's not easy at all. It is hard to raise your hand and say, I'll take the least of them, because I want to weed people into our services and our campus as opposed to weed them out and have them in the community. But yeah, and I was so surprised it made it out of subcommittee, and it ended up dying on the floor, because I'm like, how can I be held responsible if somebody comes to a neighboring establishment, again, a strip club's within that, and they might have drugs or alcohol, and they go and get arrested or whatnot, and it's found on them, that I am now held responsible for that. I mean, it is crazy. And so now, as providers that aren't getting funded, are under attack, why should we keep doing this hard work? And if it wasn't for what Council Bluffs did for me and the people in Council Bluffs that fed my potential when my mom was working and fleeing domestic violence and my dad was off being an alcoholic, I wouldn't be here. And if it wasn't for the people I said. So, like I said, there's really bad legislation that isn't going to help. If it was, again, I am your person. I will, again, I don't care what side of the aisle. We will have a party and I will support you 110%. But again, they want that easy button. They think that will solve it.
At what point, when you took this over, did you realize that your job is bigger than you? Because I can tell
Oh, yeah.
that this has ceased to be anything about Brandy Waller.
No.
And this is 100% about the job and about what it is that needs to happen, not just at New Visions.
Yeah.
It's bigger than that. When did that start to hit you that, I have just been enveloped by something that's a whole lot bigger than anything maybe I ever thought it could be?
Yeah. So I took over as interim CEO in 2022, and we sat in that position for almost a year. And my board said, we're not making any decisions because we were in a feasibility study to see if we were going to merge with another nonprofit. So I didn't really have an opportunity to really go out in the community and stuff like that. What I did in that year was really talk to people that I served, because people are pretty smart.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what's stopping you? What do you need? And then I had all of these lists and lists and lists of things on both of my campuses. And then, so that year, and then when I took over permanent in 2023, because I've only been doing that, and that's what people, see me and they're like, you've been doing it for forever, but I've only been in a leadership position, for a couple of years. And I wrote down 3 goals, because as nonprofits, it's tricky. It's like you can't be a poor nonprofit, but you can't have too much money as a nonprofit.
Uh-huh.
And when I took over, I had 14 days of operating reserve, which is not a lot,
Yeah.
and that's stressful to have 40 staff and know that their livelihood. And then again, the thousands of people you serve, and you have a 14-day leeway.
Right.
And so I wanted to increase our operating reserves, because best practices is 3 to 6 months. And then you could go after some additional funds and grants. The second thing is I wanted to take down barriers to people coming into our shelter. And the third thing is I wanted an endowment. We didn't have an endowment yet, because this work, like you said, is bigger than Brandy Waller.
Yeah.
What if I win the lottery one day and go to Florida? I want to make sure that this work continues. And I had some real gut punches. And so I went to apply for a foundation that we fit right in, and they said, you don't have enough money. And I'm like, well, how do I get more money if you won't help me get more money? And so that was a big thing. The second thing I realized is people had no clue what New Visions did. I'm the largest homeless service provider for having a homeless service veteran campus in both the state of Nebraska and Iowa, and nobody knew about it. So I'm like, I thought everybody knew, but the people in need knew about us, but other people had no clue. And then the third thing I was going to do is kind of, go on and take on systems. I'm like, I'm going to take down systems. So I got refused from a grant. I went to talk to people, and they have no clue about New Visions. And the third thing was, and that was an election year too, in 2023, is they went after my shelter again. The city council and stuff like that. And then they wanted to propose that I become a high barrier shelter, which in their mind, they just like, if you make them be sober, they'll just be sober and come in. And I'm like, how do they get sober if they don't have access to treatment and things like that? And so that first year, and again, I had to kind of go on an apology tour, because I started challenging other agencies. I'm like, why aren't you doing this? And you're not doing your job. And then I sit there and I'm like, well, hot dog, because then I started getting some grants, but it says, you probably heard it, the borrower is slave to the lender. You start getting these grants and your hands are tied of what you can do with them.
Uh-huh.
That my shelter program is my least funded program, that I do get funding for my veterans program. I do get funding for my housing program. I do get funding for street outreach, not a lot for my shelter, but I can't take from that budget and put over there. That's a way you'll lose all of your funding really fast.
Yeah.
And so just kind of understanding that. So that was the first, that first year was like, ooh, this is a lot harder than what I think it is. And doing good work sometimes is just not enough.
Well, speaking of good work, you have been working on a project, and with the goal of helping some of the men that you help every day find a path back to employment, find a path to, as you said, find actually living in a house or an apartment somewhere. And a lot of that starts with, okay, how can I physically get back to work?
Yep.
How can I do that?
Yep.
This is kind of a cool thing that we talked just briefly about it before we started, and it's really smart.
Yeah.
what this is. Tell us about it. Technology should work for you, not against you. At ThinkSpace IT, they provide expert IT solutions to keep your business running smoothly and securely. From cybersecurity and cloud services to network management and tech support, they simplify IT so you can focus on what matters most. Stay protected, stay connected, stay ahead. Visit ThinkSpaceIT.com. S&B Country Kennel is the top spot in Southwest Iowa when you need to know your dog will receive only the best. Boarding, daycare, grooming, self-washing, training, and even a membership available to a dog park over an acre in size. S&B Country Kennel also has rescue dogs, so check with them about adoption possibilities. sbcountrykennel.com, that's country spelled with a K, located just west of I-29 on Bungie Avenue, south of Council Bluffs.
Yeah, so majority of people that we serve through our shelter and street outreach program are men. And working with this population for 23 years, men need purpose. They need purpose. Like if I go and meet somebody, I'm generally, if it's a woman, asking her like, hey, how many kids you have,
Mm-hmm.
talking about a lot of things. A lot of time, men, you leave them alone for 5 minutes, they're going to cover, what do you do for a living?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when that's void, it is hard. And so for many years, we have a stipend program. And so that helps people that we pay them a small amount a week. And those are ones that are trying to get back to work, need work training history. We have a whole program called Prime for Housing that education and employment is a part of that. So we have, since we opened our doors, used a stipend program to give our people we serve an opportunity to make some money to apply for birth certificate, social security cards, if we didn't have that. And so recently, like we kind of talked about, I'm just getting inundated with a whole bunch of individuals, and everybody has a different story. But how do we get you doing something? How do I get you batting up to bat for your life again? I always say, life's not a 9-inning game. We play till we win, baby, but you have to swing the
Right.
bat. And me as a coach, I can't swing it for you. I could give you all the tools, all of that. But if you're not swinging the bat for yourself, you could never get to first base, which means you could go to second, and so many people just give up. Sometimes it's easier to do that. And so our agency for years, actually since I kind of took over, is I pay somebody to walk 4 blocks radius around our campus. Like I said, homelessness is frustrating. And I get frustrated when I come and I feed you, I give you all these things, you take a to-go cup and you throw it on the ground outside. I'm like, hot dog. I always say all the time, I call you guest for 2 reasons. Number one, I believe you need to leave. I'm not your retirement home, but you deserve your own housing.
Mm-hmm.
And guests, for another reason, is good guests are asked to stay. If you're a bad guest, you're probably going to be asked to leave. And if you're going to our neighbor's place and throwing stuff over there, they don't deserve that. So I pay somebody to go walk. And I'll tell you this story about this gentleman that recently kind of got me thinking is he was in construction, ended up hurting his back, and got on prescription medication, got addicted. And I would love to have you kind of bring some of my staff on board that have the lived expertise. I have some that, their stories, born and raised in this community. And when you hear it, it will make your toes curl of what they went through. But one of them, same thing, star athlete, was Council Bluffs Athlete of the Year, and then hurt himself in a sports injury, got into, opiates, fentanyl, heroin. And so this gentleman's stories kind of similar. Got hurt, got addicted to pain pills, was from Southwest Iowa, lost his job, lost his car, was a sad country song, went to Florida to be with his father. That didn't end up working back, came back, didn't have any housing opportunities here, ended up at my shelter. And he was just kind of existing. And our staff that goes and cleans up, he had a lot on his plate that day, and he was asking if anybody could help. So he's like, I guess I can. So he went out there and started picking up trash, walking 4 blocks. And then somebody that works at the funeral home thanked him, said, hey, thank you for doing that. And he's like, for the first time, I felt seen. And so he went back and talked to the gentleman, Lynn, that's on my team. And he's like, if you need help doing this, I could help doing this for you. And Lynn's like, yeah. And Jacob was like, I had something to look forward to. I knew in my day. And then finally he got put on a stipend. And recently he started doing that, and it gave him the confidence that at our last, when we opened up the Iowa Western welding class, where it's a 2-week, where Iowa Western's a real deal. I'm going to give a shout out to them. Like, we are so blessed to have them in our community. But yeah, they helped to fund our classroom. So we have a classroom. So their instructors come on site, do their math work, sign them up for a welding course. And within 2 weeks, they get a full welding certificate. And Jacob finally got the courage and kind of I'm going to go and do this. So he went and he graduated from the welding class. And now he's been in job interviews and things like that. And he continues to help us. He's going to be a peer for when we start the Clean Start program. And it was him in mind. At the end of the year, we had a local church that came to us and said, what do you need help with? And I'm like, I would really like to get a van, a large van. And then I could take some guys out once a week as we're going into these encampments that are closed and clean up. And it, number one, it gives them a purpose. Number two, we love our other community like everybody else does. And number three, it could be part of our work training program. So it's a win-win. and they came back and they raised enough money for me to get a van. And so we just got done with our warming center, all of those things, because I do still have only a certain number of staff, And so, yeah, in 2 weeks, we're going to launch the Clean Start program, and we're going to work with the city and the HOP team to identify places and go out starting once a week with individuals and pay them a stipend. And then just, give back to our community, because our community gives to us. That's the only reason I'm open right now, is because of the generosity of the community.
Have you been able to talk with anybody that would be taking part in that would be going out and helping with the cleanup?
Yes.
What kind of feedback?
Oh, they're excited. I have a list of 30 men on it right now. They're like, when are we starting? And, we're planning on doing smaller because it does cost, so we're looking for sponsorships and stuff like that. But realistically, it's about a $30,000 a year program to take 5 to 6 men out weekly, and pay them stipends, and then pay for PPEs and the vest and all the grabbers and the gas for it. But we pay way more than that in the city when they go and clean up. Yeah. Way more. That's not even a full-time position, and I'm taking 4, 5, 6 men out a week. What we're able to do in 3 hours would have took one half of a week, at a way, way reduced cost. So they'll get, for like 3 hours, a $50 gift card that they'll be able to go and use and stuff like that too. So,
well, I think too that it's important that the community knows about this.
Yes.
These are the types of things that, as we talked about in the beginning, that they fly under the radar. You know about it. Mm-hmm. Your staff knows about it. People are excited and feel good about it there. But the general person in the community that doesn't know anything about it, so they're only looking at the negative.
Yep.
And they do not get a view of the positive that's happening from that. So part of why we're here, because I want to be able to help spread that. And
I appreciate that. And I always say too, people only know what they know. For the community, I invite them all to come down and talk to me. And it's pretty funny. Once they come down and talk to me, they're like, hot dog. They don't understand the complexity of it. I can't even count on a hand how many people come down and are just still sold in their ways, But again, it takes listening. And I think we have to wrap up our time, but I'll end with this story. I had somebody that my friend actually dated in high school. Like, I went to TJ, he went to Lewis Central. And several years ago, I seen him having very negative comments about New Visions, mm-hmm. And people, I see it all, and I don't have time for the negative, because you could only put your energy in one place. I do invite people to have a conversation, but I don't feed into it, because whatever you feed into will grow, So a lot of times I don't comment on it or whatnot. But this individual kind of intrigued me because he never volunteered. I never knew what kind of, And so this is when my son played Little League football at the fields by Culver's, and his son played too, and I seen him there, and I went to him, and he kind of seen me, and he kind of looked around, and I said, hey, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah. I said, I see that you have very strong opinion about New Visions, and I only know what I know too. Did we do something or something happen, or, mm-hmm. I'm just curious where you got this, because if it did and I could fix it, I want to, And he's like, well, not New Visions, but you're calling all those people in. And I said, well, can you tell me more about it? And so he used to coach his kiddos in soccer by the YMCA fields off of 23rd and 24th,
Yeah, I know.
Yep. And he seen somebody that was unsheltered, and he went after a practice and gave him, Gatorades. And the guy wasn't very receptive, but kind of took it, kind of like the girl I met,
right.
Kind of rude. So he's like, ugh. But then he was there the next week, and the guy defecated in front of his kids that was out there. And of course he's screaming, and then the kids are looking more, and he's like, you're just calling them all in and all this stuff. And I listened to him. And after he said that, I said, I am so sorry that happened to you. I am so very sorry. I said, I can't imagine having little kids and having that happened. I said, I could see why you get there. I said, but the reality is that's why I've raised my hand and said, I'll take those hard cases, because I would rather have them on my campus than being, at mm-hmm. soccer fields and things like that, because people do have to defecate. And if they don't have a place to go, they're going to go, and it's not right and it's not okay, but we have to have places like New Visions. And he's one of my strongest advocates today, so just taking that time And people get to be upset. I'm upset. I have people busting out my window, when they're angry and leaving. And I'm like, no, God just replaced that window. Like, no, but they're leaving. They're doing what I asked. So I get the frustration. I get the business frustration. My husband pastors a church in this town, and we have people living behind the church and stuff like that, and littering. And, that was a big part of doing the Clean Start crew too. So we could alleviate some of those, so I can't guarantee we could be at all places or whatnot. But if there are businesses that have places that, have been, there's litter or something by, give us a call. We want to be part of the solution.
I tend to follow the philosophy of nothing good happens in the comment section, so I don't go there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can also understand why you do see it and
Yep.
why it's important for you.
Yeah.
But I am grateful that you're in the position that you're in.
Thank you.
And the work that you're doing. And I am also grateful that you opened my eyes today to some things that I hadn't thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important, not just for me, but I think for a lot of people, that this is not as narrow of an issue as someone may
Mm-hmm.
think. And you can get onto a certain track of thinking and just not want to come off of it.
Yep.
And if you see anything that doesn't fit, well, then you start making up excuses, such as you're getting paid per person that
Yeah.
comes through there, so that's why you just want to stack them.
Yeah.
Which is not true.
Not even.
So it's important that we do our best to not adopt that kind of philosophy. I'm talking about as a general population out here in the community, that we need to look at the whole picture.
Yep.
And understand that we will never have the level of understanding of this situation that you do,
No.
because we're not in it day to day.
And
So
I
we
learn
don't see
something
it.
every day. Every day I learn, I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to surround myself with pretty smart people that I could learn from too.
Well, I can tell you with absolute certainty that as of right this moment, you are the smartest person in the room.
I don't know
So,
about that.
but thank you so much, Brandy,
Thank
for
you.
coming in. Thanks for, thanks for your work. And love to hear more success stories. Anytime that you can carve out a little time to come in and talk, I'd love to do that.
Yep. Thank you.
And that is going to wrap up today's episode of Council Bluffs Today. And I thank you very much for being a part of it. And also, click like, click follow, click share. That would be good, because all of that helps the algorithm, helps to push this information and these stories out even farther, so more people know about what's happening right here at home. My name's Todd Studer, and we will see you tomorrow.